I came home from South Africa unannounced and found my grandmother dying alone in silence while my parents were partying in Paris bragging on Facebook. So I opened my grandfather's safe and took out the will. 2 hours later, 73 missed calls. My name is Dr. Aaliyah Thorne, and at 32 years old, I have spent the last 3 years fighting viral outbreaks in the most remote corners of the globe. My family thinks I am just a volunteer aid worker, running away from the pressure of our high society Atlanta life. They have no idea I own the patent to the very vaccine that just saved 1 million lives, or that my bank account looks very different from the one they imagine. But before I tell you how I dismantled my parents' fake empire in less than 24 hours, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who turned out to be the wolf. The Uber driver hesitated at the iron gates of my family estate in Buckhead. It was 2:14 in the morning, and the massive house loomed dark and silent against the humid Georgia sky. The driver asked if I was sure this was the right place, looking skeptically at my worn backpack and dusty travel boots. I told him I was sure. This was the house my grandfather built brick by brick, the house where I grew up, and the house that was currently smelling of rot even from the driveway. I punched the code into the keypad. 1958, my father's birth year. The light flashed red. Error. I tried again. Error. They had changed the code. Of course they had. Why would they keep a code for a daughter they considered a disappointment? I tossed my bag over the 6-foot brick wall and climbed over just like I used to do when I was sneaking out as a teenager. Only this time, I wasn't sneaking out to a party. I was breaking back into my own home. The grass in the front yard was overgrown, coming up to my ankles. My grandfather would have turned in his grave. He was a man of precision, a man of dignity. This lawn was a sign of surrender. I moved to the back patio and found the spare key under the potting soil of a dead fern. At least their laziness was consistent. I unlocked the back door and stepped into the kitchen. The silence was heavy, but it was the smell that stopped me in my tracks. It was a thick, suffocating mix of stale air, sour garbage, and the unmistakable sharp sting of ammonia. It was the smell of neglect, the smell of a nursing home that had lost its license. I dropped my bag and pulled out my phone, using the flashlight to cut through the gloom. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Takeout boxes piled high in the sink, sticky residue on the marble countertops. I walked toward the formal living room where my grandmother, Nana B, liked to sit and watch her soap operas. "Nana," I whispered. There was no answer. Just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I swept the light across the room. The expensive oil paintings my grandfather collected were gone, leaving pale squares on the dusty walls. In their place were digital frames cycling through photos of my parents. Mom in Dubai, Dad in Italy. Both of them smiling, that practiced fake smile that fooled everyone at the country club. I turned the light toward the vintage velvet sofa in the corner. My heart stopped. Nana B was not in her bedroom. She was not in the medical bed I had sent $5,000 to purchase last month. She was curled up on the sofa on a thin, stained sheet. I rushed over, falling to my knees. The woman who had raised me, who had taught me how to hold my head high and speak with authority, was reduced to skin and bones. Her cheeks were sunken caves. Her silver hair, usually braided to perfection, was a matted mess plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Nana, it is me. It is Aaliyah." Her eyelids fluttered. They were heavy and crusted. She looked at me, but I wasn't sure she saw me. Her eyes were milky and unfocused. "Water," she croaked. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. "Please." Water. I scrambled up and ran back to the kitchen. I yanked open the refrigerator door, expecting to find the organic juices and protein shakes I had ordered to be delivered weekly. The fridge was empty. There was a half-empty bottle of expensive champagne, a jar of olives, and a container of moldy foie gras. No water, no milk, No food suitable for an 85-year-old woman. Then I saw it. A neon yellow sticky note plastered to the inside of the fridge door. The handwriting was bubbly and looped with little hearts over the eyes. It was from Brittany, my sister-in-law. The note read, "Do not give her water after 6 p.m. Diapers are too expensive to waste." My vision blurred with a rage so hot I felt dizzy. Brittany, the woman my brother Trey married 6 months ago. The woman who looked at me with a sneer because she thought I was poor. She was rationing water for my grandmother to save money on diapers while drinking Moet champagne. I grabbed a glass and filled it from the tap, my hands shaking so hard I spilled half of it. I ran back to Nana B and lifted her head. She drank desperately, gulping and coughing water running down her chin. "They left," she whispered between sips. "They said I was too much work." I pulled my phone out again. I needed to document this. I needed evidence. But as the screen lit up, an Instagram notification popped up. "Vanessa Thorne is live. My mother." I clicked it. The screen filled with the glittering lights of the Eiffel Tower. My mother was wearing oversized Chanel sunglasses even though it was nighttime in Paris. My father was behind her holding a glass of red wine. "Hello, everyone," my mother chirped, her voice high and breathless. "We are just so blessed to be here in the City of Lights. We are sending so much love back home to Mama B. We miss you, Mom. We are only doing this trip to celebrate the family legacy." Comments were rolling in. "You guys are goals. So inspiring. Praying for your mom." I looked down at the phone and then at my grandmother lying in her own waste on a ruined sofa. My mother was eating a dinner that cost more than a month of home care while her mother was dying of thirst. I ended the video stream. The silence in the house felt different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with my fury. I looked at the phone again. My thumb hovered over the emergency dial button. 911. If I called the police now, they would come. They would see the state of the house. They would see Nana. Social services would take her into state custody. It would be a scandal. My parents would be arrested, but Nana would be lost in the system, and I would lose control of her care. No, that was too easy for them. I locked my phone screen. I was not just a granddaughter. I was Dr. Aaliyah Thorne, and I had resources my parents could not even dream of. I dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. It was a private medical concierge service in Atlanta, the kind that caters to professional athletes and billionaires. "This is Dr. Thorne," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I need a full trauma team and a mobile ICU unit at my residence in Buckhead immediately. No sirens. Use the service entrance." I hung up and looked at the sticky note on the fridge one last time. "Do not give her water." I tore the note down and shoved it into my pocket. My parents were celebrating in Paris, thinking they had gotten away with it. They thought the house was theirs. They thought the money was theirs. They thought I was just the quiet volunteer daughter who would come home, cry, and accept whatever crumbs they threw at me. They were about to find out that while they were busy spending money they didn't have, I was busy buying the bank that lent it to them. I sat on the floor holding Nana's hand, waiting for my team. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited. The sun would be up in 4 hours, and when it rose, the eviction notice would not be for me. It would be for them. I heard the gravel crunching in the driveway. My team was here. Let the games begin. The silence of the house was shattered not by sirens, but by the drunken laughter of my brother and his wife. The front door swung open with a violent thud, crashing against the expensive plaster walls. I remained seated on the floor, holding Nana B's cold hand, my body concealed by the high back of the velvet sofa. Lights flickered on in the hallway, blindingly bright. I heard the click of high heels on the hardwood floor, followed by the heavy, stumbling footsteps of my brother Trey. "Babe, did you see the way that valet looked at my bag?" Brittany's voice was shrill, cutting through the stale air like a knife. He knew it was limited edition. We are literally the royalty of Atlanta right now. I heard Trey mumble something incoherent. I could smell the distinct, acrid scent of burnt cannabis and expensive cologne drifting into the living room before they even appeared. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked from kneeling on the hard floor for so long. I stepped out from behind the sofa and into the center of the room. The reaction was immediate. Brittany screamed, dropping her clutch purse. A bottle of perfume shattered inside it, leaking a sickeningly sweet floral scent that mixed with the smell of decay in the room. "Oh my God, Trey!" she shrieked, clutching her chest. "There is a homeless person in the house. Get the gun! Get the gun right now!" Trey blinked, his eyes red and glassy. He swayed on his feet, squinting at me. He was shirtless, wearing only a pair of designer jeans that cost more than a month of Nana's medication. A massive gold chain with a pendant that read "King" hung around his neck. I did not move. I did not flinch. I just stared at them. "It is not a homeless person, you idiot," Trey slurred, wiping his nose. "It is Aaliyah." Brittany stopped screaming, but her expression shifted from fear to pure disgust. She looked me up and down, taking in my worn travel boots, my cargo pants stained with red African dust, and my simple black t-shirt. She sneered, curling her lip as if I were a cockroach that had crawled out from under the baseboards. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "The saint returns. I thought you were saving babies in the jungle or whatever. What are you doing breaking into my house in the middle of the night?" "This is not your house, Brittany," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And that woman on the couch is not just a piece of furniture you can ignore." Brittany rolled her eyes and stepped closer, waving a manicured hand in my face. "Don't start with your self-righteous attitude. We are the ones here taking care of her while you play hero overseas. Look at you. You look like you haven't showered in a week. Did you run out of money? Is that why you are here? To beg for a handout?" I ignored her and turned to Trey. He was leaning against the doorframe, struggling to keep his eyes open. "Trey, look at her," I said, pointing to Nana. "She is dehydrated. She is malnourished. And when I checked her medicine cabinet, do you know what I found?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out 3 orange prescription bottles. I shook them. They rattled loudly in the tense room. Trey looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I took a step forward, forcing him to look at me. "These bottles are supposed to contain digoxin for her heart and donepezil for her memory." But I opened them, Trey. I tasted the powder. I threw the bottles at his feet. They bounced off his expensive sneakers. "It is aspirin," I said. "Crushed up aspirin and vitamin C tablets. Who did this?" Brittany laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Oh, stop being dramatic, doctor. Medicine is medicine. The brand name stuff is a scam anyway. We are just being fiscally responsible. Do you know how much the overhead on this house is?" I turned on her, my hands balled into fists. "You replaced life-saving heart medication with vitamins," I whispered. "That is not fiscal responsibility, Brittany. That is attempted murder." Trey groaned, rubbing his face. "Look, Aaliyah, just chill out, okay? Mom said it was fine. She said Nana is too far gone anyway. Why waste $300 a month on pills for someone who doesn't even know what year it is? We needed the cash for the business." The confession hung in the air, heavy and damning. "The business?" I asked, my voice flat. "You mean the business of buying bottle service at the club? Or the business of buying fake followers for your Instagram?" "Shut up!" Brittany snapped, stepping between me and Trey. "You have no right to come in here and judge us. You abandoned this family. We are the ones dealing with the smell and the mess. If you don't like how we do things, then get out. Get out before I call the cops and have you arrested for trespassing. This is our property now." I looked at her, at the delusion in her eyes. She really believed she was untouchable. She believed that because she wore a designer dress and stood in a big house, she had power. She had no idea what real power looked like. At that exact moment, the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside broke the tension. Not one car. 3. Brittany ran to the window, pulling back the heavy drapes. "Who is that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Is that the police?" Did the neighbors call the cops on us again? I checked my watch. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. My team was efficient. I walked past her to the front door and threw it open. 3 black SUVs were idling in the driveway. The doors opened in unison. 6 people stepped out, clad in black tactical medical gear. They didn't look like paramedics. They looked like a special ops team. They carried sleek metal cases and a mobile stretcher that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. They moved in silence, bypassing Trey and Brittany completely. "Secure the perimeter," one of them said into a headset. They marched into the living room. The lead medic, a woman I had worked with in Cape Town, nodded to me. "Dr. Thorne," she said, "we have the mobile ICU prepped. What are the vitals?" "Pulse thready at 45. Severe dehydration. Possible toxicity from unprescribed NSAIDs." I reported, slipping instantly back into my professional persona. Brittany and Trey were pressed against the wall, their mouths hanging open. They had never seen equipment like this. This wasn't a county ambulance. This was private concierge medicine at the highest level, the kind of service that costs $50,000 a retainer. "What is happening?" Brittany whispered, her arrogance deflating. "Who are these people? Who is paying for this?" The medics worked with practiced precision. They inserted an IV into Nana's arm, hooked her up to a portable cardiac monitor, and gently lifted her onto the stretcher. The lead medic turned to me, handing me a tablet. "We are taking her to the private wing at Emory as requested. Security detail is already there. No visitors allowed without your biometric clearance." I signed the tablet. Brittany stepped forward, trying to regain some control. "Wait, you can't just take her. I am her primary caregiver. I have rights. You can't move her without my permission." The medic didn't even look at her. He looked at me. "Dr. Thorne, are there any other instructions?" I looked at Brittany. She looked small now, stripped of her false authority. She looked at the expensive equipment, the team of professionals obeying my commands, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. She was trying to do the math in her head. She was trying to figure out how the sister-in-law she called a beggar could command a paramilitary medical unit. "Get her out of here," I said softly, looking at Nana. "And make sure the toxicology report is expedited. I want proof of exactly what was in her system." "Toxicology?" Trey stuttered. "Why do you need that?" I walked up to Trey and stood toe-to-toe with him. "Because when the police ask me why our grandmother was poisoned, I want to be very specific about the chemicals used." The medics wheeled Nana out. I grabbed my backpack and followed them. At the door, I paused and looked back. Brittany was shaking, clutching Trey's arm. The fake vitamins lay scattered on the floor between them like confetti at a disastrous party. "Oh, and Brittany," I said, my voice cool and calm, "enjoy the house tonight. I suggest you start packing. You are going to need the head start." I slammed the heavy oak door behind me, leaving them in the silence of their crime. The war had officially begun. The vibration of my phone against my hip felt less like a notification and more like a warning shot. The screen illuminated the dark hallway with a photo of my parents smiling at a charity gala from 5 years ago. My father was calling. Not to ask if his mother had survived the ambulance ride. Not to ask if she was in pain. He was calling because the security notification on his phone had alerted him that the back door was open. I slid my thumb across the screen and put the phone to my ear without saying a word. "Aaliyah." My father's voice boomed, breathless and angry. "Brittany just called me. She is hysterical. She says you brought a SWAT team into the house. Have you lost your mind?" We are in the middle of a very delicate dinner with investors in Paris, and my phone is blowing up because you decided to play hero. I kept walking toward the end of the hallway, toward the heavy double oak doors of my grandfather's study. "Nana was dehydrated, Dad," I said calmly. "She had aspirin in her heart medication bottles." "Do not change the subject," he shouted. "You had no right to remove her. And listen to me very carefully, Aaliyah. Do not go near the study. Do not touch anything in my office. We have sensitive client files in there. If you touch that door, I will have you arrested for corporate espionage." I stopped in front of the study doors. They were sealed with a new digital padlock, one that looked out of place against the vintage wood. Sensitive client files, I repeated. Or is that where you keep the truth about why the electricity was almost shut off last month? There was a silence on the line. Then my mother's voice cut in shrill and panicked. Byron, tell her to leave. Tell her she is trespassing. Aaliyah, get out of that house right now. You are ruining everything. I hung up. I didn't have the code for the padlock, but I didn't need it. I went to the antique umbrella stand in the corner and picked up my grandfather's heavy brass walking stick. It was solid-headed with a silver lion. With one precise swing, I smashed the digital lock. It shattered plastic and batteries skittering across the floor. I pushed the doors open. The smell hit me instantly. Old leather, cherry tobacco, and cedar. It was the smell of safety. This was the only room in the house my parents hadn't renovated into a white marble monstrosity. It was exactly as grandfather had left it 5 years ago. Or so I thought. I flipped on the desk lamp. The chaos was subtle, but it was there. Papers were shoved haphazardly into drawers. The velvet lining of the bookshelves had been torn, as if someone had been searching for a hidden safe. They had been looking for money. They had been looking for anything they could sell. I walked behind the massive mahogany desk and knelt down. My parents had spent years trying to drill into the wall safe behind the painting of the Atlanta skyline. I could see the fresh scratch marks on the metal where they had tried to pry it open with a crowbar. They thought it required a combination or a key. They were so arrogant, they never paid attention to how grandfather actually operated. He was a man who believed that technology should serve security, not convenience. I reached under the desk and pressed a hidden panel. The painting slid aside, revealing the steel face of the safe. There was no keypad, just a small dark glass circle at eye level. A retinal scanner. I remembered the day he had it installed. I was 22, freshly accepted into medical school. He had told me that passwords could be stolen and keys could be copied, but the eyes were the window to the soul. He said mine were the only honest eyes in the bloodline. I leaned forward, pressing my left eye to the scanner. A red beam tracked across my vision. For a second, I held my breath. Had my parents found a way to bypass this too? Then came the mechanical whir, the heavy click of tumblers shifting, the light turned green, the heavy steel door swung open. My parents believed this safe held gold bars or bearer bonds. They believed it held the fortune that would fix their mistakes. It was almost empty. I reached in and pulled out a stack of envelopes, bound by a red rubber band. They weren't assets. They were threats. I opened the first one. It was a final notice from the bank. Notice of default. I opened the second one. A foreclosure auction notice. I laid the papers out on the desk, reading the terrifying numbers. My parents had refinanced the estate 3 times in the last 4 years. They had pulled out every cent of equity to fund their trips, their cars, and Brittany's failed boutique. The house was underwater. But the date on the foreclosure notice made my blood run cold. Sale date, August 15th. That was 7 days from now. They weren't in Paris to celebrate. They weren't posting photos of foie gras because they were wealthy. They were posting them to keep up appearances. They were running out the clock. I dug deeper into the safe. At the very back, hidden under a velvet bag, was a thick leather King James Bible. My grandfather's Bible. I pulled it out and felt the weight of it. It fell open naturally to the Book of Psalms. A thick envelope was pressed between the pages. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't just a will. It was a codicil, a legal amendment dated 2 weeks before his death. I read the text, my breath catching in my throat. In the event that my son Byron Thorne fails to maintain the medical standards required for my wife Beatrice Thorne, full power of attorney over her health and assets shall immediately transfer to my granddaughter, Dr. Aaliyah Thorne. Furthermore, should the estate face insolvency, control of the family trust shall bypass my son and transfer directly to Aaliyah Thorne to ensure the protection of the property. I leaned back in the leather chair, clutching the document. My parents thought they had burned the original will. They thought they had control. But grandfather knew. He knew they were weak. He knew they were greedy. and he knew that one day they would leave Nana to die. He had left me the weapon to destroy them. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. Please, Aaliyah, don't do anything rash. We are meeting with Monsieur Dubois tomorrow. He is going to invest 5 million into Trey's company. We will fix everything. Just go home. I looked at the text, and then back at the foreclosure notice. Monsieur Dubois. The name sounded familiar. He was a French venture capitalist known for investing in tech startups. My parents were trying to secure $5 million from him based on lies. They were using the house as collateral, a house they didn't really own anymore, a house that was being sold by the bank in a week. They weren't just bad children, they were criminals. They were in Paris to commit international fraud. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. Mr. Stein, I said when he answered, his voice groggy with sleep. Wake up. I need you to file an emergency injunction with the court as soon as it opens. I have the medical power of attorney, and Mr. Stein, I need you to find out everything you can about a Monsieur Dubois in Paris. I looked around the study, at the legacy my grandfather built. My parents were willing to burn it all down for one more night of champagne. I stood up and placed the documents into my backpack. They thought I was the black sheep. They thought I was the one who ran away. But wolves don't run away. We just wait for the right moment to strike. And now I had the teeth to do it. I walked out of the study, leaving the broken lock on the floor. I didn't need to lock the door anymore. There was nothing left in there for them to steal. The only thing of value was coming with me. The sterile hum of the private suite at Emory Hospital was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It replaced the terrified silence of my family home and the cruel laughter of my brother. I sat in the high back leather chair next to the bed, watching the cardiac monitor trace the steady green rhythm of my grandmother's heart. Nana B looked small against the crisp white linens. The nurses had bathed her, removed the filth of neglect, and braided her silver hair into a neat crown around her head. The IV drip was replenishing the fluids my family had denied her, working to flush the toxins from her fragile system. I had upgraded her to the presidential suite not because I wanted to show off, but because I needed the security. 2 armed guards stood outside the door, instructed to allow no one in without my direct biometric authorization. I held her hand, feeling the warmth slowly returning to her skin. Her eyelids fluttered, and for the first time in hours, her breathing shifted from shallow gasps to a deeper, more natural rhythm. Aaliyah, she whispered, her voice rough from days of dehydration. Is that you? Or am I dreaming? I squeezed her hand gently, leaning close so she wouldn't have to strain to hear me. I am here, Nana. You are safe. You are at the hospital. She turned her head slowly, her eyes focusing on my face. Tears welled up in the corners, sliding down into the deep lines of her cheeks. I thought you forgot me. She said the words, cracking my heart open. They told me you didn't care. Brittany said you were too busy saving the world to worry about an old woman who smelled like death. The rage flared in my chest again, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed to be calm for her. I never forgot you, Nana. I came as soon as I knew. She gripped my hand with surprising strength, her knuckles turning white. They took my dignity, Aaliyah. That girl Brittany, she would stand in the doorway and eat while I begged for water. She told Trey that if I died before the 1st of the month, they wouldn't have to pay the insurance premium. She laughed about it. She said the money would be better spent on a new backdrop for her videos. I closed my eyes, breathing through the fury. My sister-in-law had reduced the matriarch of our family, the woman who marched for civil rights and built a community legacy, to an inconvenience in her budget. Rest now, Nana, I said, smoothing the hair back from her forehead. I'm going to take care of everything. They will never hurt you again. She drifted back to sleep, the sedatives finally allowing her body the rest it desperately needed. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere out there in the sprawling suburbs, my brother and his wife were probably frantically packing, or perhaps they were passed out from their night of partying. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from our family group chat. My mother had posted a photo from Paris. It was a picture of her and my father holding shopping bags from Louis Vuitton. The caption read, "Retail therapy is the best therapy. Cannot wait to bring these beauties home." They had no idea. They had absolutely no idea that I had taken Nana. Or maybe they did and they just didn't care enough to interrupt their shopping spree. I looked at the foreclosure notice I had taken from the safe, which was now scanned and saved on my encrypted drive. They had 7 days. 7 days until the bank took the house. If they knew I had the money to save it, they would come begging. If they knew I was planning to destroy them, they would lawyer up and try to hide the remaining assets. I needed them to stay in Paris. I needed them distracted. I needed them to think they had won. I unlocked my phone and opened the text thread with my parents. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. This was the hardest part. I had to become the person they thought I was. The weak, pliable daughter. The doormat. I typed slowly, making sure every word tasted like surrender. Mom, Dad. I am sorry about earlier. I was just shocked to see Nana so frail. I took her to the hospital just for a checkup, but I will bring her back home as soon as she is discharged. You guys are right. I have been gone a long time, and I don't understand the pressure you have been under. Please enjoy Paris. I will go back to the house and clean up the mess I made. I will make sure everything is perfect for when you return. I read it over. It was pathetic. It was exactly what they wanted to hear. I hit send. The response came less than a minute later. They were awake. They were watching. My mother replied first. "Thank God you finally came to your senses, Aaliyah. We forgive you. We know you get emotional. Just make sure you clean the carpets in the hallway. Brittany said you tracked mud everywhere with those awful boots." Then a message from my father. "And do not touch the study. We have a very important investor coming to see the house next week. We need everything to look pristine." And then the kicker. A message from Brittany, who must have been added to the chat by my mother. "Make sure you clear out the storage room on the second floor. The lighting in there is perfect. I am turning it into my content studio next week. I need space to film my unboxing videos. And Aaliyah, try to be quiet when you're in the house. I need my beauty sleep." I stared at the screen. She wanted to turn my grandfather's library, the room where he taught me to read, into a studio for TikTok videos. She wanted to unbox designer purses in the same house where she refused to buy water for a dying woman. A cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a predator who had just watched the prey step into the trap. "Sure, Brittany," I typed back. "I will get the room ready for you. It will be a surprise." I put the phone down and picked up my secure satellite phone, the one I used for business dealings that required absolute discretion. I dialed a number that bypassed receptionists and went straight to the private line of Mr. Stein, my personal attorney and the shark who managed my portfolio. He answered on the first ring. "Dr. Thorne, it is 4 a.m. Is everything all right?" "Everything is going according to plan, Mr. Stein," I said, my voice devoid of the tremor I had used with my parents. "I need you to execute Operation Phoenix immediately." There was a pause on the other line, and I could hear the rustle of him sitting up in bed and reaching for his glasses. "Are you sure, Aaliyah? Once we pull the trigger on this, there is no going back. You will own the debt. You will essentially be their landlord." I looked back at Nana sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed. I thought about the sticky note on the fridge. I thought about Brittany's content studio. I am sure I said, "Contact the bank as soon as they open. I want to buy the non-performing note on the Thorne estate. Pay the full arrears plus the penalty fees. But do it through the shell company. Do not let the name Thorne appear on any of the paperwork until the ink is dry." "Understood," Mr. Stein said, his voice shifting into professional gear. "We will have the deed transferred to Phoenix Holdings by noon. What about the eviction process?" "Not yet," I said, watching the sun begin to crest over the Atlanta skyline, painting the city in hues of blood orange and gold. Let them come home. Let them think they are safe. Let Brittany set up her camera. I want them to be comfortable. Because when I pull the rug out from under them, I want them to feel every single inch of the fall. I hung up the phone. My parents were in Paris eating croissants and thinking they had subdued their rebellious daughter. Brittany was dreaming of internet fame. Trey was likely sleeping off his high. They thought I was cleaning the house for them. In a way, I was. I was about to scrub the stain of their greed from my family legacy forever. I sat back in the chair and closed my eyes, waiting for the bank to open. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the rats to come home. The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of the Thorne estate, but it brought no warmth to the cold calculation unfolding in the living room. Brittany was pacing back and forth in a white silk power suit that I knew she had charged to a credit card that was likely already declined. She was barking orders at me, snapping her fingers as if I were a hired servant rather than the owner of the house she was standing in. "Aaliyah, make sure those baseboards are spotless," Brittany hissed, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "We have a very exclusive investor coming in 20 minutes. If I see a speck of dust, I will make sure you sleep in the garage tonight." I didn't say a word. I just dipped the rag into the bucket of soapy water and continued scrubbing the floor. I had tied my hair back and put on an old, oversized t-shirt, effectively rendering myself invisible to people like Brittany and Trey. To them, I was just labor. I was part of the furniture. They had no idea that while I was scrubbing, I was also listening to every word of their desperate, illegal plan. Trey came down the stairs looking jittery. He was wearing one of my father's vintage suits, which was slightly too big in the shoulders, giving him the appearance of a child playing dress-up. "Are you sure about this, Britt?" he whispered, glancing at the front door. "Dad said we weren't supposed to show the house until next week. If he finds out we are trying to sell it behind his back, he will kill us." Brittany grabbed him by the lapels and pulled him close. "Your dad is in Paris spending money he does not have," she whispered harshly. "By the time he gets back, the bank will have seized this place. This realtor says he has a cash buyer who can close in 48 hours. We take the cash, we pay off the immediate debts, and we keep the rest for ourselves to start over in LA. Do you want to be homeless, Trey? Because that is the alternative." Trey swallowed hard and nodded. Okay, let's do it." "But what about her?" He pointed a shaking finger at me. Brittany laughed a cold, dismissive sound. "She is nobody. She does not even know what a title deed is. Just tell her to stay in the kitchen and keep her mouth shut." I kept my head down, hiding the smirk that was threatening to break through. They were trying to conduct a short sale on a property that was already in the process of being acquired by my holding company. They were trying to sell a house they did not own to a buyer who was likely just as shady as they were. The doorbell rang. It wasn't the melodic chime intended for guests. It was a sharp, insistent buzz. Brittany smoothed her hair and put on her best fake smile. "Showtime," she whispered. "Aaliyah, get in the kitchen. Now." I picked up my bucket and walked slowly toward the kitchen, but I didn't close the door all the way. I stood in the shadows watching. The realtor was a man named Mr. Gentry. He wore a suit that was too shiny and smelled of desperation and cheap cologne. Behind him was a couple who looked less like investors and more like sharks circling a wounded animal. The man was chewing gum with his mouth open, and the woman was tapping long acrylic nails against her phone screen. "Welcome to the Thorne estate," Brittany cooed, extending her hand. "Please come in. You will find that the photos simply do not do it justice. This is a historic property full of old-world charm, but with all the modern amenities." Mr. Gentry nodded, looking around the foyer with greedy eyes. "My clients are very interested in a quick transaction, Mrs. Thorne. As we discussed on the phone, this would be a cash offer as is. No inspections, no delays. Music to my ears." Brittany beamed. "Please follow me. Let me show you the formal living room." As they moved deeper into the house, I slipped out of the kitchen. I didn't go to the garage. Instead, I headed for the utility closet under the main staircase. My grandfather was a brilliant man, but he was also paranoid. When he built this house, he installed a centralized control system for everything. The lights, the security, the climate control, and most importantly, the plumbing and fire suppression systems. He wanted to be able to control his environment with the touch of a button. My parents and Trey never bothered to learn how it worked. To them, it was just a confusing panel of buttons they ignored. To me, it was a keyboard. I opened the panel and the small screen glowed blue in the darkness. I entered the override code my grandfather had taught me when I was 12. System access granted. I could hear Brittany's voice echoing from the living room. And here we have the original fireplace imported from Italy. We had the entire chimney swept and inspected just last week. The infrastructure of this house is impeccable. We have never had a leak, never had a draft. It is practically brand new. The lie was so bold it was almost impressive. The plumbing in this house hadn't been updated since the 90s. The pipes were old and temperamental, requiring a delicate touch, or in this case, a catastrophic surge. I navigated to the irrigation and fire suppression menu. My finger hovered over the test sequence button. Grandfather had programmed a system flush feature designed to clear the pipes of sediment by forcing water through at maximum pressure. It was meant to be used by professionals during maintenance. It was definitely not meant to be used during an open house. I waited until I heard them move into the dining room directly under the main chandelier. And this dining room, Brittany was saying, her voice dripping with arrogance, has hosted senators and celebrities. Imagine the dinner parties you could throw here. It is the epitome of elegance. I pressed the button. At first there was just a sound. A low, groaning rumble deep within the walls like a beast waking up. The realtor paused. "What was that sound, Mrs. Thorne?" Brittany laughed nervously. "Oh, just the high-efficiency air conditioning kicking on. It is a very powerful system. Powerful." The rumble grew louder, turning into a violent clanking. Then the first sprinkler head in the dining room ceiling burst open. It didn't spray a fine mist of clean water. Because the system hadn't been flushed in years, the water that shot out was black, stagnant sludge that had been sitting in the iron pipes for a decade. It hit the crystal chandelier with the force of a fire hose. I heard Brittany scream. Then the second sprinkler popped. Then the third. In seconds, the elegant dining room was transformed into a swamp. Black, oily water rained down, covering the white silk power suit, covering the potential buyers, covering the expensive hardwood floors. I watched through the crack in the closet door. It was absolute chaos. "My hair!" Brittany shrieked, trying to shield herself with her hands, but it was useless. The black sludge was everywhere. My designer suit. "Make it stop. Trey, do something." Trey was running around in circles, slipping on the wet floor, waving his arms uselessly. "I don't know how to stop it. I don't know where the shutoff is." The female buyer who had been tapping on her phone was now screaming at the top of her lungs, her expensive blowout ruined by the foul-smelling deluge. "You said the plumbing was new," she yelled, spitting dirty water out of her mouth. "You said this house was pristine. This is a health hazard. This is disgusting." Mr. Gentry, the realtor, was already heading for the door, slipping and sliding, his shiny suit now matte with grime. "The deal is off," he shouted over the roar of the water. "Do not call me again. You people are frauds." "Wait!" Brittany screamed, running after him, grabbing his arm and leaving a black handprint on his jacket. "We can fix this. It is just a malfunction. We can knock 50,000 off the price." "Get off me!" he snarled, shoving her away. "You are lucky we don't sue you for damages." The front door slammed shut behind them. Inside the house, the water continued to pour down. It was relentless. The smell was rising now, a mix of rust mold and stale earth. It was the smell of every lie they had told finally coming to the surface. I quietly tapped the command on the panel to stop the flush sequence. The roar of the water slowly died down to a trickle, and then silence. I slipped out of the utility closet and walked toward the dining room. The devastation was total. The expensive rug was ruined. The walls were streaked with black. And in the center of it all sat Brittany and Trey huddled together on the floor, looking like two drowned rats. Brittany's mascara was running down her face, mixing with the sludge. She looked up and saw me standing there completely dry, completely clean. For a second, confusion clouded her eyes. She couldn't understand how I had escaped the chaos. She couldn't understand why I wasn't running around in a panic like them. "Aaliyah," she gasped, wiping sludge from her mouth. "Did you do this? Did you break the pipes?" I looked at her with an expression of pure innocence. "Me?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. "I was just scrubbing the baseboards like you told me to Brittany. I am just the help, remember. I don't know anything about how this house works." Trey coughed, spitting out water. "It must have been the pressure," he mumbled. "The old pipes couldn't handle the heat." "We are screwed, Britt. We are so screwed." Brittany slammed her fist into the puddle, splashing dirty water into her own face. "No!" she screamed, a primal sound of frustration. "We need that money. We need to sell this house before your parents get back. Clean this up, Aaliyah. Clean this up right now." I looked at the disaster. It would take a professional hazmat crew days to clean this. It would cost thousands of dollars they didn't have. "I am sorry, Brittany," I said, turning to walk away, "but I think this is a bit above my pay grade. And since I am sleeping in the garage tonight anyway, I should probably go get my sleeping bag ready." I walked up the stairs, leaving them sitting in the mess they had created. As I reached the landing, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Mr. Stein. "Phase 1 complete. The house is no longer sellable on the open market. Proceed with the acquisition." I went into my room and locked the door. I could still hear Brittany screaming downstairs, blaming Trey, blaming the realtor, blaming the universe. She blamed everyone but herself. But as I looked out the window at the driveway where the buyers had fled, I knew this was just the beginning. The water damage was bad, but the financial storm that was about to hit them would be a hurricane. They wanted to sell my grandfather's legacy for quick cash. Instead, they had just baptized themselves in the reality of their own incompetence. I lay down on my bed and closed my eyes. The smell of the stagnant water was drifting upstairs, but to me it didn't smell like sewage. It smelled like victory. The marble lobby of the Hotel Plaza Athénée in Paris smelled of fresh lilies and old money. My parents stood at the concierge desk looking every bit the part of American royalty. My mother, Vanessa, was wearing a trench coat that cost more than a Honda Civic, and my father, Byron, was tapping his platinum American Express card on the mahogany counter with an air of impatient entitlement. They had just finished a 10-day spree of luxury dining and high-end shopping, convinced that the investor meeting scheduled for next week would wipe away their mounting debts like a magic eraser. They were flying high on delusion. The concierge, a man with impeccable posture and a face of stone, ran the card. There was a sharp, abrasive beep. "I am sorry, Monsieur Thorne," the concierge said, his voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "The transaction was declined." My father laughed. It was a loud, booming laugh meant to signal to everyone in the lobby that this was a ridiculous mistake. "Don't be absurd," my father said, pushing the card back toward the man. "Run it again. It is probably your internet connection. This is a Centurion card. It does not get declined." The concierge sighed, the kind of sigh reserved for tourists who pretend to be richer than they are. He inserted the chip this time. Beep. Declined. My mother shifted uncomfortably, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. "Byron, stop playing around, use the other card. We have a flight to catch." My father pulled out his Visa. Beep. Declined. He pulled out his MasterCard. Beep. Declined. A cold sweat began to break out on his forehead, glistening under the crystal chandeliers. The line behind them was growing. People were staring. The illusion of the wealthy Thorne dynasty was cracking in real time. "I do not understand," my father stammered, his hands shaking. "I just used this for breakfast." "Perhaps you should call your bank?" the concierge suggested, his politeness now edged with ice. "In the meantime, how would you like to settle the bill? It is 12,000 euros. My father pulled his phone out of his pocket. He had turned it off for the last 12 hours to avoid roaming charges and to fully immerse himself in the fantasy of his vacation. He held the power button. The Apple logo appeared. As soon as the network connected, the phone didn't just vibrate. It convulsed. Ding, 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 ding. The notifications came in a machine gun rhythm. It wasn't just text messages. It was an avalanche of digital disasters. 73 missed calls. My father stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. "Who is it?" Vanessa hissed, leaning over his shoulder. "Is it the investor? Is it Monsieur Dubois?" "It is everyone," my father whispered. There were 12 missed calls from the country club, 3 from the leasing company for the Bentley, 5 from the fraud department of the bank, and 53 from numbers he didn't recognize. Then came the texts. "Your membership at the Buckhead Club has been revoked for non-payment. Please return your locker key immediately. Your vehicle ending in license plate King B has been marked for repossession. Your credit score has dropped 150 points due to a judgment filed against the estate." And then the voicemail from his golf buddy Marcus. "Byron, what is going on, man? I just saw a moving truck outside your house. Are you guys moving? I thought you said you were renovating." "A moving truck!" My mother snatched the phone from his hand, scrolling frantically. Her eyes widened behind her dark lenses. "What did Aaliyah do?" she shrieked. "She was supposed to be watching the house. Why are people calling about repossession? That ungrateful little brat must have messed up the mail. She probably forgot to pay the utility bill and triggered some kind of audit." They stood there in the lobby of one of the most expensive hotels in the world, completely broke. They couldn't pay the bill. They couldn't pay for a taxi to the airport. In the end, the humiliation was total. My father had to make a call to an old college friend who lived in Paris, a man he had spent years bragging to. He had to beg for a wire transfer lying through his teeth about a banking error and a hacked account. The friend sent the money, but the tone in his voice made it clear that the friendship was over. They paid the bill and slunk out of the hotel, not into a private car, but into a regular street taxi. But the nightmare was just beginning. At Charles de Gaulle Airport, they marched to the first-class check-in counter, ready to sip champagne and escape their troubles. The agent typed in their names and frowned. "I see your reservation, Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, but it appears the payment for the upgrade was reversed this morning due to insufficient funds." My father slammed his hand on the counter. "This is a conspiracy. I demand to speak to a manager." "You can speak to whoever you like, sir," the agent said, unimpressed. "But unless you can provide a valid form of payment right now, you will have to fly on your original economy tickets." "Economy?" My mother looked as if she had been asked to ride on the wing. "I cannot fly coach," she whispered, clutching her pearls. "I have bad knees. I need leg room. Byron fixed this." He couldn't fix it. The cards were dead. The cash was gone. 10 hours later, my parents were sitting in row 42, the very back of the plane right next to the lavatories. My mother was squeezed between a man eating a tuna sandwich and a crying toddler. My father's knees were pressed against the seat in front of him. Every time the bathroom door opened, the smell of chemical disinfectant wafted over them, mixing with the smell of their own desperation. They didn't sleep. They sat there seething. They didn't blame themselves. They didn't blame the years of spending money they didn't have. They didn't blame the fraud. They blamed me. "It is Aaliyah," my father muttered, staring at the seat back pocket in front of him. "She did something. She accessed the accounts. I told you we shouldn't have given her the security code to the gate. She is jealous, Vanessa. She has always been jealous of our success because she is just a dusty aid worker living in a tent. She is going to pay for this," my mother hissed, adjusting her sleeping mask, which was pointless in the cramped seat. "As soon as we land, I am kicking her out. I don't care if she has nowhere to go. She is out on the street. And then I am going to sue her for emotional distress." They spent 10 hours building a tower of hatred. By the time the wheels touched down in Atlanta, they had convinced themselves that I was the villain and they were the victims of a cruel prank. They expected the usual treatment upon arrival. Usually a driver from the elite car service would be waiting at baggage claim, holding a sign with their name. They would be whisked away in a black SUV with climate control and chilled water. They walked out of the terminal pushing their own luggage cart because they didn't have cash for a porter. They scanned the crowd of drivers. Nothing. No sign, no driver, no black SUV. Byron, call the service, my mother snapped, wiping sweat from her forehead. This is unacceptable. My father tried to call. The line was dead. His cell phone service had been suspended for non-payment while they were in the air. He stood there in his wrinkled linen suit, holding a dead phone surrounded by travelers rushing home to their families. For the first time in 20 years, Byron Thorne looked exactly like what he was. A fraud. We have to take a taxi, he spat out the word, tasting like poison. They walked to the taxi stand, waiting in line for 20 minutes in the humid Georgia heat. When they finally got a cab, it was an old sedan with a broken air conditioner and a driver who didn't care about their last name. Take us to Buckhead, my father commanded, trying to regain some shred of dignity. And step on it. The taxi merged onto the highway. My parents sat in the back, silence thick between them. They were exhausted, humiliated, and furious. They were heading home to reclaim their castle. They were heading home to punish the daughter who had failed them. My father looked out the window, watching the city pass by. Just wait until I get my hands on her, he whispered. She thinks she can embarrass us. She thinks she can play games. I am going to destroy her. My mother nodded, applying a fresh coat of lipstick in the rearview mirror. We will throw her clothes on the lawn, she said. We will make sure the neighbors see it. We will show everyone what happens when you cross the thorns. The taxi turned off the highway and began winding through the tree-lined streets of Buckhead. They were getting closer. They were anticipating the moment they would burst through the door and unleash their wrath. They had no idea that the locks had been changed. They had no idea that the police were already there. And they certainly had no idea that the daughter they planned to destroy was currently sitting in their living room, drinking their wine, and holding the deed to their house. The taxi driver turned the final corner. There it is, my father said, pointing to the gates. Home. But as the house came into view, the red and blue lights reflecting off the trees told a different story. This wasn't a homecoming, it was a crime scene. The taxi driver did not even bother to pull into the driveway. He stopped at the curb, idling his noisy engine, and waiting for my father to count out the last of his crumbled cash. My parents stepped out onto the asphalt, not with the grace of returning monarchs, but with the exhaustion of defeated refugees. Their linen clothes were wrinkled from the long flight, and the humid Atlanta air instantly plastered their hair to their foreheads. My father Byron straightened his jacket, trying to summon some semblance of dignity before facing his neighbors. He looked up at the house, expecting to see the warm, inviting glow of the porch lights. Instead, he saw a disco of disaster. Red and blue lights flashed rhythmically, bouncing off the white columns of the estate and illuminating the oak trees in eerie strobe effects. The silence of the exclusive neighborhood was broken by the crackle of police radios and the murmur of curious neighbors who had gathered at the end of their driveways in silk robes and slippers. My mother Vanessa grabbed my father's arm, her fingernails digging into his skin. Byron, she gasped, breathless with panic. Is it a fire? Did she burn the house down? I told you she was unstable. But there was no smoke. There were no fire trucks, just 4 Atlanta Police Department cruisers and a black unmarked van from the narcotics division. My parents ran toward the house, dragging their suitcases behind them, the wheels clattering loudly on the pavement. As they pushed through the open gate, the scene in the driveway became clear. My brother Trey was face down on the pavement near the garage. His hands were behind his back, and an officer was tightening the zip ties around his wrists. He was shirtless again, sweating profusely and screaming obscenities at the ground. "Get off me!" Trey yelled, his voice cracking. "You do not know who my father is. This is entrapment. That stuff is for personal use. It is medicinal." Standing a few feet away was Brittany. She was not in handcuffs. She was standing next to a detective, wrapping her arms around herself and sobbing loudly. But I knew Brittany. I knew the difference between real tears and the performance art she was currently displaying. She was shaking her head, pointing at Trey and nodding vigorously at whatever the detective was writing in his notebook. My father dropped his suitcase and sprinted forward. "Officer, stop!" He commanded, his voice booming with the entitlement of a man who had never been told no. "What is the meaning of this? Unhand my son immediately. Do you know who I am? I am Byron Thorne. I am a pillar of this community." The officer standing over Trey didn't even look up. He just tightened the grip on Trey's arm and hauled him to his feet. "Sir, stay back," the officer warned, holding up a hand. "Your son is under arrest for the cultivation and distribution of a controlled substance." "Cultivation!" my mother shrieked, running up behind my father. "That is absurd. Trey is an entrepreneur. He runs a consulting firm." The officer pointed toward the open garage doors. Inside the three-car garage where my father used to keep his vintage Jag stood a sophisticated hydroponic setup. Grow lights, ventilation tubes, and dozens of marijuana plants filled the space. It looked less like a garage and more like a scene from a cartel documentary. "We found 3 pounds of processed product in the trunk of the BMW," the officer continued, "and a significant amount of ecstasy pills in the master bedroom safe." My father turned to Trey, his face going from pale to a deep shade of purple. "Trey," he whispered, horrified. "What have you done? In my house. You brought drugs into my house." Trey looked at our father, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "I needed the money," Dad Trey spat back. "You guys were in Paris spending everything we had. Brittany needed new inventory for her store. The investors weren't calling back. I had to do something. It was supposed to be temporary." My mother turned to Brittany, hoping for an ally. "Brittany, you knew about this. You let him do this." Brittany's sob turned into a wail. She looked at my mother with wide, innocent eyes. "I tried to stop him, Vanessa," she cried. "I begged him. I told him it was illegal. I told him he was endangering the family. But he wouldn't listen. He said he was the man of the house. He forced me to keep quiet. He said he would hurt me if I told anyone." Trey's jaw dropped. He stared at his wife, the woman he had stolen from his grandmother, to support the woman he had risked prison for. "You liar!" Trey screamed, struggling against the officer. "You helped me set up the lights. You are the one who found the buyer for the pills. You said we needed $5,000 for your new backdrop." "Officer, he is lying," Brittany shouted over him, stepping closer to the detective for protection. "He is an addict. He is paranoid. I am just a victim here. Please, I just want to go to my parents' house. I do not feel safe here." I watched it all from the front porch. I was leaning against the railing, holding a glass of iced tea, watching the family implode. I had been the one who called in the anonymous tip 2 hours ago. I had told the dispatch that I smelled strong chemical odors coming from the garage and heard screaming. It wasn't entirely a lie. The chemicals were from the fertilizer, and the screaming was just Trey rapping along to his own music. My father finally looked up and saw me. I stood there calm and collected in a clean silk blouse, looking down at the chaos. I didn't look shocked. I didn't look sad. I looked like the only adult in the room. And that broke him. The humiliation of the declined cards, the economy flight, the taxi ride, and now his son in handcuffs in front of the neighbors was too much. He needed to hit something. He needed to hurt someone to feel powerful again. And I was the perfect target. "You," my father roared, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this. You called them. You have been here the whole time watching him do this, and you said nothing until we got home. You wanted to humiliate us." He charged up the driveway. He moved faster than I had seen him move in years, fueled by pure blind rage. "Byron, stop," my mother screamed, but he didn't listen. He bounded up the porch steps, his hand raised high, ready to strike me across the face, just like he used to do when I was a child, and spoke out of turn. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I didn't even put down my tea. Just as his hand began its downward arc, A massive shadow stepped out from the darkened foyer. It was Marcus, the head of my private security detail. Marcus was 6'5" and built like a tank. He moved with a speed that defied his size. He caught my father's wrist in mid-air. The sound of the impact was dull and heavy. My father gasped, not just from the pain of the sudden stop, but from the shock of it. He tried to pull his hand back, but Marcus held it like a vice. "Step back, sir," Marcus said, his voice low and rumbling like thunder. "Do not touch Dr. Thorne." My father looked at Marcus, then at me. He looked at the hand that was easily overpowering him. For the first time in his life, Byron Thorne was physically helpless in his own home. "Who are you?" my father sputtered, wincing as Marcus squeezed his wrist slightly. "Who is this thug, Aaliyah?" "Get him off me." "He is not a thug, Dad," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "He is my head of security. And if you raise your hand to me again, he will break it." Marcus released him with a firm shove, sending my father stumbling back down a step. My father rubbed his wrist, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. He looked at the daughter he thought was weak, the daughter he thought was a failure. And he realized he didn't know me at all. You brought a bodyguard into my house," he whispered. "My house, Dad," I corrected him gently. "Technically, the bank owns it right now, but we will get to that later. Right now, I think you should focus on getting a lawyer for your son, although since your credit cards are declined, I am not sure who you are going to hire." The police were leading Trey toward the squad car. He was weeping now, defeat washing over him. Brittany was already getting into an Uber she had summoned, abandoning her husband without a second glance. My mother stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking between her arrested son, her fleeing daughter-in-law, and her stranger of a daughter. She looked old. The facelift she had gotten last year couldn't hide the fear etching into her face. "Aaliyah," my mother pleaded, her voice trembling. "Help us. You know people. You are a doctor. Tell them Trey has a problem. Tell them he needs rehab, not jail. Do something." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had live-streamed her dinner while her own mother lay dying of thirst. "I am doing something, Mom," I said, turning to walk back inside. "I am cleaning up the trash." I signaled Marcus to close the door. The heavy oak door slammed shut, cutting off the sound of the police radios and my mother's sobbing. I locked the deadbolt. Outside, the flashing lights continued to paint the night, but inside the air was cool and still. I walked to the window and watched as the squad car drove away with my brother. 1 down, 2 to go. The silence in the living room was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the nervous tapping of my brother Trey's foot against the hardwood floor. It was 3 in the morning. We were sitting in a circle like a perverse family reunion, except my brother was smelling of jail, holding cell disinfectant, and my sister-in-law, Brittany, was staring at the wall with the hollow look of someone who had just drained her entire life savings to pay a bail bondsman. My parents sat on the velvet love seat, united in their delusion. My father, Byron, had poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hand trembling slightly as he swirled the amber liquid. My mother, Vanessa, had touched up her makeup, covering the tear tracks from the driveway scene with a fresh layer of powder. She looked composed, almost regal, if you ignored the panic vibrating behind her eyes. I sat opposite them on the wingback chair, holding a manila folder in my lap. I was the only one who was calm. I was the only one who knew that this was not a negotiation. It was an arraignment. My mother cleared her throat, the sound sharp in the quiet room. She looked at Trey, then at Brittany, and finally she turned her gaze to me. Her expression softened, shifting from the hysterical woman in the driveway to the martyr she had played perfectly for 30 years. "Aaliyah," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We need to talk about what happened tonight. We need to talk about how you overreacted." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I wanted to see how far she would go. "You have been away for a long time, darling," my mother continued, leaning forward. "You do not understand the stress we have been under. You come back here with your judgment and your dramatic bodyguards, and you think you see the truth. But you are looking at this all wrong. You are projecting your own guilt for abandoning us onto your poor brother. She reached out and patted Trey's knee. He flinched, but didn't pull away. Trey is a victim here, she said firmly. He was trying to help the family. He made a mistake, yes, but he did it out of love. And Nana B. Oh, Aaliyah, you have no idea how difficult it is to care for an elderly woman with dementia. She forgets to eat. She refuses water. We tried our best. We hired nurses. We sat by her bedside for hours. I felt a cold laugh building in my chest, but I kept my face impassive. Nurses. Bedside vigils. The lies were so bold they were almost impressive. And Paris, my father chimed in, finding his voice. You think we were just having fun. You think we were abandoning my mother. That trip was a strategic business maneuver, Aaliyah. We were there to meet with Monsieur Dubois. He is a major investor. We were securing $5 million to save this estate to pay for the best care for your grandmother. We were sacrificing our time and energy for this family. He took a long sip of whiskey, looking at me with righteous indignation. And what do we get in return? He asked, slamming the glass down. You call the police on your own brother. You humiliate us in front of the neighbors. You have caused irreparable damage to our reputation. Do you know how much it is going to cost to fix this? This was the pivot, the setup. They had painted themselves as the heroes and me as the villain. Now came the demand. My mother sighed, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. The lawyer says Trey's case is complicated. Because of the amount of drugs found, it is a felony charge with a mandatory minimum sentence. We need a specialist, a top criminal defense attorney. She paused, waiting for me to offer. I didn't. We found one, she continued, her voice hardening slightly. But he requires a retainer up front. Plus, we need to pay off the neighbors to keep them from talking to the press. And we need to get the car out of impound. She looked at me, expecting me to crumble under the weight of family duty. We need $50,000, Aaliyah, my father said bluntly. Right now. We know you have some savings from your aid work. You never spend money on clothes or travel. You must have something put away. We need you to transfer it to the family account immediately. I looked at them. I looked at the parents who had flown first class while their mother rotted. I looked at the brother who had sold his grandmother's pain medication to buy rims for his car. And they were asking me for $50,000. They thought I was their piggy bank. They thought I was still the desperate little girl who would buy their love. I stood up slowly, clutching the manila folder. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice quiet and steady. You want me to pay $50,000 to clean up the mess you made. You want me to pay for the lawyer to defend the brother who poisoned our grandmother. And you want me to believe that the Paris trip where you bought Louis Vuitton bags and ate foie gras was a selfless business trip. My mother stood up, her face flushing red. How dare you, she hissed. We are your parents. We gave you life. You owe us, Aaliyah. You owe us for every year we raised you in this house. You owe us for the private schools. You owe us respect. I looked at Brittany. She was watching me with a mix of hatred and hunger. She wanted me to pay too. If I paid, she might get her savings back. I walked over to the coffee table, the centerpiece of the room where they had placed their empty glasses and their shattered pride. I do not have $50,000 for you, I said. My father's face fell. What do you mean you don't have it? He shouted. You have been working for 3 years. What did you do with your money? Give it all away to charity, you useless, naive girl. I ignored him. I placed the manila folder on the table. I don't have money for you, I repeated, but I do have this. My mother looked at the folder suspiciously. What is this? She asked. I opened it. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a thick, stapled report with the logo of Emory University Hospital. The second was a set of legal papers with the seal of the Georgia Superior Court. I slid the medical report toward them. That is the toxicology report and the physical exam results for Nana B. I said, my voice turning to ice. My mother picked it up, her hands shaking. She read the first page. Her face went pale. Stage 3 malnutrition. I read aloud, reciting the words that were burned into my memory. Severe dehydration resulting in kidney strain. And most interestingly, traces of diphenhydramine and benzodiazepines in her system. Drugs that were never prescribed to her. Drugs that are used to knock people out. Trey made a small choking sound in the back of his throat. You said you took care of her, I said, looking directly at my mother. You said she refused to eat. The doctors say she was starved, Vanessa. Starved to the point that her body began to consume its own muscle mass. That is not dementia. That is torture. My mother dropped the report on the table as if it were burning her skin. That is a lie, she whispered. The doctors are lying. You paid them to write that. I pointed to the second document. And this, I said, is a subpoena. My father froze. A what? He asked. A subpoena, I said. I filed for emergency custody of Nana Bea yesterday morning. Based on that medical report, the judge granted it immediately. But he also issued warrants for an investigation into elder abuse and financial fraud. I looked at each of them. You are not just facing drug charges for Trey. You are facing felony abuse charges, all of you. You wanted a lawyer for Trey. You are going to need 3 lawyers, one for each of you. My father stared at the papers, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The arrogance was gone, the entitlement was gone, replaced by the cold, hard reality of consequences. You are suing your own family, he stammered. I leaned across the table, getting close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath. You stopped being my family when you left Nana to die in her own waste while you drank champagne in Paris, I whispered. I am not suing you, Dad. I am prosecuting you. Brittany stood up suddenly, knocking her chair over. I didn't do it, she screamed, pointing at my parents. It was them. They told me to do it. They told me not to feed her. I am just the daughter-in-law. I want a deal. Aaliyah, tell them I want a deal. Sit down. Brittany, my mother snapped, grabbing her arm. Do not say another word. I picked up the folder and turned to leave. You have 24 hours, I said, not to pay me, but to find a place to stay, because once the bank processes the foreclosure next week and the police conclude their investigation into the abuse, this house will be a crime scene. And I don't think they let you live in a crime scene. I walked toward the stairs, feeling their eyes boring into my back. Aaliyah, wait! My mother cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. We can work this out. We can explain. Please don't do this. We are the only family you have. I stopped on the bottom step and looked back at them. The 3 people who were supposed to love me. The 3 people who loved money more than they loved their own mother. No, I said. You are not my family. You are just the people who used to live here. I walked up the stairs, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. I needed to get some sleep. Tomorrow I had a bank to buy and a legacy to reclaim, and for the first time in years, I would sleep soundly, knowing that justice wasn't just coming, it had arrived. The sun rose over the Thorne estate on Tuesday morning, but it brought no light to the people inside. It only illuminated the dust motes, dancing in the silent foyer, and the undeniable reality of the bank trucks idling at the curb. I stood on the landing of the grand staircase, drinking my coffee black. Below me, the dissolution of a dynasty was taking place in real time. It was not dignified. It was not quiet. It was a chaotic scramble that smelled of fear and expensive perfume turning sour on panicked skin. The bank representatives had arrived promptly at 9. 2 men in ill-fitting gray suits carrying rolls of neon orange tape and clipboards thick with legal paperwork. They did not care about the history of the house. They did not care about the parties my mother had thrown or the business deals my father had closed in the study. To them, this architectural masterpiece was just a non-performing asset, a liability to be liquidated. One of the men was currently standing at the front door, smoothing a large sticker onto the wood. The sound of the adhesive tape ripping off the roll was loud and violent, like fabric tearing. Foreclosure, property of the bank, do not enter. Inside, my mother was running from room to room clutching a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. She was not packing family photo albums. She was not packing heirlooms. She was packing the silver candlesticks from the dining room. She was packing the crystal vases. She was packing anything that could be pawned. "Byron, do something," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Stop him! He is putting a sticker on the door. The neighbors can see. The Joneses are walking their dog, and they are looking right at us." My father was standing in the center of the living room, holding a phone that had no service. He was screaming at a dead line, pretending he was talking to someone powerful. "I am calling the governor," he yelled at the bank agent who walked past him without glancing up. "You cannot do this. This is a violation of my civil rights. I have a meeting with investors next week. You are disrupting commerce." The bank agent simply placed a red tag on the television. "Sir, please step aside," the agent said, his voice bored. "You have 1 hour to vacate the premises with personal effects only. Fixtures and furniture are now property of the bank." Then there was Brittany. If my parents were sinking with the ship, Brittany was the rat scurrying for the lifeboat. She was in the hallway dragging a black garbage bag that was bulging with odd shapes. She had raided the guest closets. She had raided the pantry. I saw the corner of a designer blender poking through the plastic. "I am not losing everything because you people are incompetent," she muttered as she hauled the bag toward the back door. "I have rights. I have a brand to protect." She looked up and saw me standing on the stairs. She didn't feel shame. She felt resentment. "Are you just going to stand there?" she snapped. "Help me carry this. There is a whole set of Le Creuset pots in the kitchen. We can sell them on eBay. Grab them before the bank guy locks the door." I took a sip of my coffee. "I think I will pass, Brittany," I said calmly. "I prefer to travel light." She cursed at me and dragged her loot toward the garage, abandoning her husband, who was currently being processed at the county jail, to save a blender. The chaos reached a fever pitch when the lead agent walked over to my father. "Mr. Thorne, I need your keys. All of them. House, car, and gate." My father clutched his keychain like it was a lifeline. "You cannot have them," he sputtered. "This is my house. My father built this house." "Not anymore, sir. Hand them over or we will have the sheriff remove you for trespassing." My father looked at my mother. She had stopped packing and was now sobbing into a silk scarf. He looked at the orange sticker on the window. He looked at me, the daughter he had called a failure, standing calmly above him. He was about to hand over the keys. The surrender was imminent. And then we heard it. The low, powerful purr of an engine that did not belong to a bank truck or a taxi. I looked out the window. A Bentley flying spur, jet black and polished to a mirror shine, glided through the open gates. It moved with the kind of authority that made the bank trucks look like toys. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like ink. My father froze. My mother stopped crying. Even Brittany paused in her looting, dragging her garbage bag back into the hallway to peek out the window. "Who is that?" my mother whispered, wiping her eyes. "Is it the investor? Is it Monsieur Dubois? Did he come to save us?" The car came to a smooth stop right in front of the orange-taped door. The driver's side door opened, and a uniformed chauffeur stepped out. He walked around to the back passenger door and opened it. A man stepped out. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit that fit him like a second skin. His shoes were Italian leather. His briefcase was alligator. He had silver hair and the sharp, predatory gaze of a man who billed $1,000 an hour. It was Mr. Stein, my lawyer. But to my parents, he was a stranger. A rich, powerful stranger. My father straightened his spine. He smoothed his hair and buttoned his wrinkled jacket. He saw money, and instinctively he tried to mirror it. He walked out onto the porch, stepping right past the bank agent. "Can I help you, sir?" my father asked, his voice regaining some of its old pompous bluster. "I am afraid you have caught us at a bad time. A misunderstanding with the bank." Mr. Stein didn't even look at my father. He looked at the bank agent. "Are you the lead on this foreclosure, Mr. Stein asked, his voice crisp and authoritative. The bank agent looked at the car, then at the suit. He swallowed hard. Yes, I am. Who are you? Mr. Stein reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single envelope. It wasn't thick. It was sleek and white. I am representing Phoenix Holdings, he said. My father gasped. Phoenix Holdings, he repeated. Mr. Stein handed the envelope to the agent. My client, Phoenix Holdings, has just purchased the non-performing note on this property from your institution. The wire transfer was cleared at 8:45 this morning. You are no longer the creditor. My client is. The agent opened the envelope and scanned the document. His eyes widened. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call, mumbling in hushed tones. My parents stood there listening to the one-sided conversation. Yes. Confirmed. Full amount. Plus penalties. Okay. Understood. The agent hung up. He looked at Mr. Stein with new respect. Everything seems to be in order, sir. The bank has released the lien. The property is yours. Yours. My father grabbed my mother's arm. His face lit up with a joy that was almost manic. Did you hear that, Vanessa? He whispered loudly. Phoenix Holdings bought the debt. They paid it off. The bank agents began peeling the orange tape off the door. They picked up their clipboards and walked back to their trucks. Within 2 minutes they were gone. The driveway was empty except for the Bentley and my family. My father walked up to Mr. Stein, extending his hand with a beaming smile. Sir, I cannot thank you enough, he said, shaking Mr. Stein's hand vigorously. I knew Phoenix would come through. I have been telling my wife that we have powerful friends in high places. Please tell your chairman that Byron Thorne sends his deepest regards. My mother rushed forward, her tears miraculously gone. Oh, thank God, she gushed. We were so worried. We thought there had been a mix-up. Please come inside. Let us offer you a drink. The house is a bit of a mess, but we can explain. Brittany dropped her garbage bag in the hallway and came running out, smoothing her dress. I knew it, she said, laughing hysterically. I knew we weren't going to lose the house. I told those bank guys they were making a mistake. They were celebrating. They were high-fiving each other. They genuinely believed that Phoenix Holdings was a savior, a mysterious benefactor, or a business partner my father had forgotten he had. They had no idea that Phoenix Holdings was a shell company registered in Delaware. They had no idea that the sole signatory on the Phoenix Holdings account was standing right there on the stairs holding a cold cup of coffee. Mr. Stein pulled his hand away from my father. He didn't smile. He didn't accept the invitation. Mr. Thorne, he said coolly, my client did not purchase this debt to do you a favor. This is a business transaction. My father laughed, waving his hand dismissively. Of course, business. We understand. We can work out the repayment terms. I have a big deal closing next week. I can write you a check for the interest. Mr. Stein opened his briefcase and pulled out a new document. My client is not interested in interest payments, Mr. Thorne. My client has acquired the deed in lieu of foreclosure. This house now belongs to Phoenix Holdings. My father's smile faltered slightly, but he kept it plastered on. Well, sure, technically. But we can lease it back, right? Or set up a payment plan. We are partners, after all. Mr. Stein looked at him. My client will be arriving shortly to discuss the terms of your residency, he said. Until then, I suggest you do not unpack those bags. He turned and got back into the Bentley. The chauffeur closed the door. The car idled silently, a black shark waiting in the water. My parents stood on the driveway, confused but hopeful. Who is the client? My mother asked, clutching my father's arm. Is it Elon? Is it Jay-Z? Who do you know, Byron, who has this kind of money? My father puffed out his chest. It could be anyone, Vanessa. I have made a lot of connections over the years. Whoever it is, they clearly value the Thorne name. They saved us. That is what matters. They saved us from those vultures at the bank. I walked down the stairs and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was fully up now, glaring off the hood of the Bentley. My parents turned to me. Their relief had instantly morphed back into arrogance. You see, Aaliyah? My father sneered, pointing at the departing bank trucks. You thought you would see us fall, didn't you? You stood there and watched them put tape on our door and you did nothing. But you forgot who your father is. You forgot that I have built an empire that people want to protect. My mother laughed a harsh, brittle sound. Go put your things back in your room, Brittany, she called out. And Aaliyah, since you were so useless this morning, you can help your sister-in-law unpack. And then you can scrub the floors. We have a VIP guest coming, the owner of Phoenix Holdings. I want this place spotless. I looked at them. I looked at their smug faces. I looked at the absolute certainty they had that the world revolved around them. They thought they had been saved. I looked at the Bentley. Mr. Stein lowered the window just an inch and gave me a barely perceptible nod. I didn't smile. I will get right on that, Mother, I said. I turned and walked back inside. I didn't go to get a mop. I went to the kitchen to pour another cup of coffee, because I knew exactly who the owner of Phoenix Holdings was, and she didn't want the floors scrubbed, she wanted them cleared. The invitation to the Atlanta Black Gala is the golden ticket of the year. It is the night when the city's elite gather to celebrate success culture and philanthropy. For 30 years, my parents Byron and Vanessa Thorne held court at this event. They were the couple everyone wanted to sit next to. They were the ones who donated the loudest and laughed the hardest. But tonight was different. Tonight they were not guests of honor. They were gatecrashers fighting for their lives. I watched them from the secluded vantage point of the VIP balcony, hidden by heavy velvet curtains. I had been at the venue since noon, overseeing the final preparations for the launch of my foundation. I saw my parents arrive, and I almost felt a pang of pity. Almost. My mother was wearing a dress I recognized from her 40th birthday party. It was a sequined silver gown that had once been stunning, but now looked dated and tired. She had tried to alter it herself because the tailor she used for decades had refused to take her call due to an unpaid bill. I could see the safety pin holding the hem on the left side. My father was wearing his tuxedo from 10 years ago. It was tight across the shoulders, and the fabric had that distinct, dull sheen of age. He held his head high, but his eyes were darting around the room with frantic, desperate energy. And then there was Brittany trailing behind them in a dress she had clearly borrowed from a friend. It was too short for a formal gala, and she looked uncomfortable tugging at the neckline every few seconds. They walked toward the red carpet expecting the photographers to flash their bulbs. They paused, posing with their practiced smiles, waiting for the attention they felt they deserved. The photographers lowered their cameras. It was a brutal, silent rejection. The paparazzi knew who signed the checks in this town, and they knew the Thorns were yesterday's news. My father's smile faltered for a second, but he recovered quickly, gripping my mother's elbow and steering her toward the entrance. Just keep walking, Vanessa, he whispered loud enough for the microphone near the door to pick up. They just didn't recognize us. We have been away in Paris. We need to find the representative from Phoenix Holdings immediately. They entered the ballroom. The room was bathed in warm amber light and filled with the soft hum of jazz and expensive conversation. Usually, this would be the moment the crowd parted for them. People would rush over to kiss my mother's cheek and shake my father's hand. Tonight, the room seemed to shrink away from them. As they walked toward the bar, conversation stopped. Heads turned, not in admiration, but in judgment. I could see the whispers rippling through the crowd like a wave. Everyone knew. In Atlanta, bad news travels faster than light, and the news of the police raid and the foreclosure had spread through the country club set before the handcuffs were even off my brother's wrists. My father tried to flag down an old friend, a banking executive named Marcus. Marcus, good to see you, my father boomed, reaching out a hand. We must play 18 holes next week. I have some stories from Paris that will blow your mind. Marcus didn't take the hand. He looked at my father with a mix of pity and disgust. I don't think so, Byron, he said, his voice cool. I heard about the raid, and I heard about your mother. You should be ashamed of yourself. Marcus turned his back, leaving my father's hand hanging in midair. My mother gasped, clutching her clutch purse to her chest. She looked around, searching for a friendly face. She spotted Mrs. Jenkins, the head of the charity committee. "Margaret," she called out, rushing toward her. "Oh, thank goodness. It is so chaotic in here. We need to find our table. I assume we are at the head table as usual." Mrs. Jenkins took a step back, smoothing her silk gown. "There is no table for you, Vanessa," she said quietly. "Your tickets were canceled when the check bounced. We only let you in because the new sponsor insisted that everyone be welcomed. But do not presume to sit with the board. There is a standing table near the kitchen if you wish to stay." "The kitchen?" My mother looked like she had been slapped. She was being banished to the servants' entrance in the very room where she used to reign as queen. "Let's go," my father hissed, grabbing her arm. "We don't need them. We are here for business. We need to find the owner of Phoenix Holdings. Once we secure the deal with them, these people will be begging to sit with us again." They spent the next hour working the room like desperate salespeople. They cornered anyone who looked wealthy, asking if they were affiliated with Phoenix. They were sweating now, the heat of the room and the weight of their humiliation pressing down on them. Brittany had abandoned them, finding the open bar and downing champagne to numb the embarrassment of being ignored by her peers. I checked my watch. It was time. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight hit the center stage, illuminating the crystal podium. The master of ceremonies. A famous news anchor stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Black Gala. Tonight is a night of new beginnings. We are here to honor a legacy of excellence and to introduce a new force in our community, a company that has quietly donated $5 million to the Atlanta Medical Center this morning." My parents froze. They stood near the back of the room, holding their breath. $5 million, my father whispered. "That is them. That is Phoenix. Vanessa, straighten your hair. We need to be ready to rush the stage." The MC continued. "This company stepped in to save one of our city's most historic estates, ensuring that Black history remains in Black hands. But more than that, the founder of this company is a woman who has dedicated her life to saving others, often without recognition. She has returned home to heal not just patients, but a broken system." My mother grabbed my father's hand. "It is a woman," she whispered excitedly. "That is good. I can talk to a woman. I will compliment her dress. I will cry a little about Nana. We can win her over. Please welcome the chairwoman of Phoenix Holdings and the new owner of the Thorne Estate." My parents took a step forward, ready to launch their charm offensive. Dr. Aaliyah Thorne. The name hung in the air for a split second before the applause erupted. It was thunderous. The room exploded with cheers, but in the back of the room near the kitchen doors there was only silence. My father's face went slack. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother dropped her clutch purse. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, spilling her lipstick and mints, but she didn't notice. Brittany choked on her champagne, coughing violently. The heavy velvet curtains on the stage parted. I stepped out. I was not wearing my cargo pants. I was not wearing my scrubs. I was wearing a custom gold gown that shimmered like liquid metal under the stage lights. My hair was styled in intricate braids adorned with gold cuffs. I wore the diamond earrings my grandfather had left me in a safety deposit box my parents didn't know existed. I walked to the podium with my head high, looking out at the sea of faces. I saw the admiration. I saw the respect. And then I found them. I locked eyes with my parents. They looked like they were seeing a ghost, a terrifying golden ghost. My father was shaking his head slowly, as if trying to deny the reality before him. He looked at the woman on stage, the powerful billionaire philanthropist, and tried to reconcile her with the daughter he had tried to slap yesterday. He couldn't do it. The cognitive dissonance was breaking him. My mother was gripping a chair for support. She looked at my dress, the dress that cost more than her entire wardrobe, and she realized the truth. She realized that every time she had called me poor, every time she had mocked my volunteer work, I had been laughing at her. I leaned into the microphone. The room went silent, waiting for me to speak. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady and commanding. For a long time, I believed that wealth was measured by what you wear or where you vacation. I was raised to believe that image was everything. I paused, letting the words sink in. I saw my mother flinch. But I learned the hard way that true wealth is character. True wealth is how you treat the vulnerable when no one is watching. I looked directly at my parents. The spotlight spilled over me, making me look like the judgment they had been running from their whole lives. Some people build empires on sand and lies, I continued. And when the storm comes, they are washed away. Phoenix Holdings is about rising from those ashes. It is about taking what was broken and making it whole, even if you have to burn the rod away to do it. The crowd erupted again, unaware of the personal war being fought in the subtext. My father turned to run. He couldn't take it. He turned to the exit, pushing past a waiter, desperate to escape the glare of my success. But the door was blocked by admirers trying to get a better look at the stage. He was trapped. Trapped in the room with the daughter he had betrayed, who was now the most powerful person in his world. I smiled a small, cold smile. The gala was just beginning. But for the Thorne dynasty, the party was officially over. The applause from the ballroom was still ringing in my ears as I stepped off the stage and into the cool, dimly lit corridor of the backstage area. My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from the sheer adrenaline of the truth finally being spoken. I had expected my parents to flee. I had expected them to run and hide in shame. But I had forgotten that rats cornered in a trap do not run. They turn on each other. I walked toward the private exit that led to the VIP parking lot where Marcus was waiting with the car. I needed fresh air. I needed to wash the sight of my father's terrified face out of my mind. But before I could reach the heavy metal doors, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the loading dock. It was Brittany. She looked like a wreck. The borrowed dress was twisted around her waist, and her mascara had run down her cheeks in jagged black lines. She wasn't holding a drink anymore. She was holding her phone, clutching it with both hands like it was a holy relic. "Aaliyah," she hissed, looking over her shoulder to make sure we were alone. "Wait, you have to listen to me." I stopped, but I didn't turn fully toward her. I signaled Marcus to hang back but stay close. "I have nothing to say to you, Brittany," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the concrete hallway. "The lawyers will do the talking from now on." She rushed forward, stopping just inches from me. She smelled of stale champagne and desperation. "No, you don't understand," she pleaded, her eyes wide and manic. "I can help you. I know they are going down. I saw your face on that stage. You are going to bury them, Aaliyah, and I do not want to be buried with them. I am young. I have my whole life ahead of me. I cannot go to prison for something they made me do." I looked at her with genuine curiosity. "They made you buy the fake drugs?" I asked. "They made you starve Nana?" She shook her head vigorously, her blonde hair flying around her face. "That is nothing," she whispered. "That is just neglect. A good lawyer can get that knocked down to a misdemeanor. I am talking about the real plan. The plan they came up with the night before they left for Paris." I narrowed my eyes. "What plan?" Brittany unlocked her phone with trembling fingers. She pulled up a video file. "I recorded them," she said. "I record everything, Aaliyah. You know that. I thought I could use it for a reality show one day. But this is different." She pressed play and shoved the screen toward me. The video was grainy, shot from a low angle, likely from a phone propped up on a kitchen counter. But the audio was crystal clear. It was my parents sitting at the kitchen island drinking wine. "We have to increase the policy," my father's voice said on the recording. "If she passes away from natural causes, the payout is only $500,000. But if it is an accident, like a fall, or a sudden reaction to medication, it triggers the double indemnity clause." My mother's voice chimed in, chillingly calm. "We can't make it look violent, Byron. It has to be subtle. If we stop the heart medication and replace it with high doses of sedatives, she will just drift off in her sleep." The coroner will just see an old woman whose heart gave out. We collect the $1 million we pay off the house, and we have enough left over for a fresh start in Europe. I stared at the screen. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just negligent, they were plotting premeditated murder. They were discussing the death of my grandmother like it was a business transaction, a way to liquidate an asset. Brittany paused the video. "I have 3 more clips," she said. Discussing dates, discussing how to hide the body if she died before they got back. "I will give you everything, Aaliyah. The phone, the cloud password, everything. I will testify against them. I will say they forced me to go along with it." "And what do you want in return?" I asked, looking at the woman who was willing to sell her husband's parents to save her own skin. "Immunity," she said quickly. "I want you to tell the DA that I was a whistleblower. I want to walk away. And maybe a small consulting fee for my cooperation. 5,000, just to get me back to California." I almost laughed. She was trying to extort me while confessing to conspiracy to commit murder. Before I could answer, the heavy metal door to the ballroom burst open. My brother Trey stumbled into the hallway. He had been looking for Brittany, probably to ask her for money for a drink since the open bar had cut him off. He saw us standing there. He saw the phone in Brittany's hand. He saw the video paused on the screen. He knew exactly what that video was. "You?" Trey stammered, pointing a shaking finger at his wife. "You recorded them. You are showing her the kitchen tapes." Brittany spun around, hiding the phone behind her back. "Trey, go away," she screamed. "I am handling this. I am saving us. Saving us!" Trey roared, lunging forward. "You are ratting us out. You are snitching to her. You traitor!" He didn't look like my little brother anymore. He looked like a wounded animal lashing out. He grabbed Brittany by the shoulders and slammed her against the concrete wall. "Give me the phone," he yelled, grappling for her hands. Delete it right now." "Get off me!" Brittany shrieked, scratching at his face with her acrylic nails. "I am not going to jail for you. You are a loser, Trey. You have always been a loser. Your sister owns the house, your parents are murderers, and you are nothing." That broke him. Trey pulled back his fist, ready to strike the woman he had married, the woman he had stolen for. Marcus moved before I could even shout. He stepped out of the shadows and grabbed Trey by the back of his tuxedo jacket, yanking him away from Brittany like he was a rag doll. He threw Trey to the ground. Trey scrambled, trying to get up, but Marcus simply placed a heavy boot on his chest, pinning him to the floor. "Enough," Marcus said, his voice deep and final. Brittany slid down the wall, sobbing, clutching her phone to her chest. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Her face was scratched. Just then the door opened again. My parents rushed in. They had been looking for the exit, trying to flee the gala before anyone else could humiliate them. They stopped dead in their tracks. They saw Trey pinned on the floor. They saw Brittany weeping in the corner. And they saw me standing in the middle of it all, calm and golden. "What is going on here?" my father demanded, trying to summon authority he no longer had. "Get your foot off my son." I turned to them. I held out my hand to Brittany. "Give me the phone, Brittany," I said. She didn't hesitate. She handed it to me. I held it up so my parents could see the screen. I pressed play on the video of them discussing the insurance payout. My father's face went gray. My mother let out a small, strangled sound and covered her mouth with her hand. We were just talking," my father stammered, backing away. "That was just hypothetical. We would never actually do it." "Save it for the judge, Dad," I said. From the parking lot, the sound of sirens began to wail. Not one siren, many. They grew louder and louder, cutting through the night air. I didn't call them this time. The security team at the gala had called them when the fight broke out. But when the officers burst through the exit doors, weapons drawn, they weren't just responding to a domestic disturbance. Marcus stepped back, raising his hands. "Officers, I have evidence of a conspiracy to commit capital murder," I said loud and clear, pointing to the phone in my hand. "And these 4 people are the conspirators." The police didn't ask questions. The evidence was playing on the screen. The intent was clear. They moved in. "Turn around, hands behind your back. My father was shoved against the wall, his face pressed into the cold concrete. My mother was crying hysterically, begging them not to ruin her dress. Trey was hauled up from the floor and cuffed again for the second time in 48 hours. And Brittany. She stood up, wiping her face, expecting to be let go. "I helped you," she said to the officer, reaching for her. "I gave the evidence. She promised me immunity." I looked at her cold and unmoving. "I promised you nothing, Brittany," I said. "I accepted the evidence. But you were in the kitchen when that video was filmed. I can hear your voice agreeing with them. You are not a whistleblower. You are an accomplice." The officer spun Brittany around and clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists. She screamed a high-pitched sound of pure betrayal. I watched as my entire family was marched out the exit door, not into a limousine, but into the back of waiting squad cars. The flashing blue lights illuminated their faces one last time. Fear, regret, hatred. They were finally united. They were finally together, just like they always wanted to be. I turned to Marcus, who was straightening his suit jacket. "Are you okay, Dr. Thorne?" he asked. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool night air that suddenly felt cleaner than it had in years. "I am better than okay, Marcus," I said. "I am free." I walked to the Bentley, leaving the empty hallway behind me. The gala was still going on inside. The music was playing. The world was turning. But the rot that had infected my life for so long had finally been cut out. And tomorrow, I would start the healing. The fluorescent lights of the interrogation room buzzed with a sound that grated against the nerves, a stark contrast to the crystal chandeliers my parents were used to. I stood behind the one-way mirror watching them. They were seated at a metal table, handcuffed to the chairs, stripped of their jewelry, their phones, and their dignity. My father Byron was sweating through his tuxedo shirt, the collar unbuttoned to reveal his flushed neck. My mother Vanessa was picking at her chipped manicure, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. They looked small. Without the backdrop of the estate, without the props of their wealth, they were just two frightened people caught in a web of their own making. I signaled to the detective that I was ready. He opened the heavy steel door and I walked in. I was carrying a single thick binder. I placed it on the table with a heavy thud. The sound made my mother jump. She looked up at me and for a second, I saw a flash of hope in her eyes. She thought I was there to bail them out. She thought I was there to make it all go away. "Aaliyah, thank God," my father breathed out, leaning forward as much as the cuffs would allow. "You need to tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them we have assets. Tell them about the deal with Phoenix. We can pay whatever fine they want. Just get us out of here." I sat down opposite them. I didn't smile. I didn't offer comfort. I opened the binder. "There is no deal with Phoenix, Dad," I said calmly. "Because I am Phoenix, and I am not here to bail you out. I am here to close the case." My mother, confused, shook her head. "What are you talking about? We need a lawyer. We need to go home." I turned the binder around so they could see the documents inside. It wasn't just the video Brittany had recorded. It was something far worse. Something I had found when I audited the family accounts earlier that morning. "We know about the attempted murder plot," I said, my voice steady. "But that is just the tip of the iceberg." The district attorney was willing to offer a plea deal for the conspiracy charge until I showed him this. I pointed to a series of bank transfer records. "You forged Nana B's signature on her federal pension documents," I said. "You didn't just steal from her savings account. You accessed a government-secured fund. You rerouted her retirement checks into a shell company registered to Trey." My father's face went from red to a terrifying shade of gray. He knew what that meant. Stealing from a bank is a state crime. Stealing federal pension funds is a federal crime. That was a loan. He stammered, sweat dripping down his nose. "We intended to pay it back. Nana would have wanted us to use it. It was for the family." I flipped the page to a handwriting analysis report. The forensic analyst confirmed that the signatures were traced. I continued. And since the amount exceeds $500,000 over 5 years, you are looking at mandatory federal prison time. There is no parole in the federal system, Dad. You serve 85% of your sentence. The reality hit them like a physical blow. My mother let out a high-pitched wail. I didn't sign anything, she screamed, turning on my father. It was him. Byron handled all the paperwork. I just signed where he told me to. I didn't know where the money came from. He told me it was dividends from his investments. My father looked at her, his mouth hanging open in betrayal. You liar! He shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. You are the one who spent it. You are the one who needed the new car and the trips to Paris. You told me to find the money, Vanessa. You said you didn't care how I got it. Just get it. It was Trey, my mother yelled over him, her eyes wide with panic. It was for Trey. He has a drug problem. We were trying to help him. We are victims here. We were being extorted by our own son. I watched them, the perfect couple, the pillars of the community. They were tearing each other apart piece by piece, desperate to save their own skin. The love they claimed to have was nothing more than a mutual agreement to enable each other's greed. And now that the money was gone, the love was gone too. The door opened and a man in a dark suit walked in. He wasn't a police officer. He was a federal prosecutor. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Based on the evidence provided by Dr. Thorne and the admission of your co-conspirator Brittany regarding the insurance scheme, we are upgrading the charges. You are looking at wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder. My father slumped in his chair, defeated. My mother put her head on the table and sobbed. The minimum sentence for these combined charges is 10 years, the prosecutor said, closing his file. Each. And I will be recommending the maximum. I stood up. I had seen enough. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done. Aaliyah, my father whispered as I walked to the door. We are your parents. How can you do this? I stopped and looked back at them one last time. You stopped being my parents the day you decided my grandmother was worth more dead than alive, I said. I walked out, leaving them to the silence of their consequences. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. The fall of the Thorne dynasty was the biggest story in Atlanta. The gallery was filled with former friends, neighbors, and business associates, all eager to see the final chapter of the scandal. I sat in the front row. Next to me in a wheelchair was Nana Bia. She didn't need the wheelchair anymore. She had regained her strength, her skin was glowing, and her eyes were sharp. But we decided she should use it today. We wanted the judge to see exactly who they had tried to hurt. We wanted them to see the frailty they had tried to exploit. When the bailiff announced the defendants, the room went silent. My parents walked in wearing orange jumpsuits. They looked like ghosts. My father had lost 20 pounds, his hair white and unkempt. My mother looked aged without her makeup and fillers, her face lined with bitterness. Trey followed, looking sober for the first time in his life, but broken. Brittany was there too, sitting separately, looking at the floor, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The trial had been swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Today was just for sentencing. The judge, a stern woman with glasses, looked down at the defense table. Before I pass sentence, she said, looking at Nana Bia, the victim would like to make a statement. I helped Nana wheel her chair to the front of the court. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Nana didn't look at the judge. She turned her chair to face her son. My father looked up, tears streaming down his face. Mama, he whispered, I am sorry. Nana sat up straighter. She gripped the armrests of her chair, not in weakness, but in power. I carried you in my womb. Byron, she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing through the courtroom. I worked 2 jobs to send you to college. I gave you the down payment for that house. I gave you everything I had. She paused, letting the weight of her history fill the space. And when I was old and weak, you didn't see a mother. You saw a bank account. You saw an obstacle. You took the very life I gave you and you tried to cash it in. My mother began to sob loudly, but Nana didn't look at her. She kept her eyes locked on my father. "You are not a victim," she said. "You are a predator. And a predator has no place in my house. From this day forward, you are not my son. You are not a thorn. You are a stranger to me." She turned her chair back to the judge. "That is all, Your Honor." The gavel came down like a thunderclap. "Byron and Vanessa Thorne, for your crimes against your own family and the federal government, I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison." My mother screamed. My father put his head in his hands. "Trey Thorne," the judge continued, 5 years, and mandatory rehabilitation. "And Brittany," the judge said, looking at my sister-in-law with disdain. "Because of your cooperation and your lesser role, I am sentencing you to 5 years probation. However, you are hereby ordered to leave the state of Georgia. If you return before your probation is up, you will go to prison." The guards moved in. The sound of chains rattling filled the air. My parents were pulled to their feet. They looked back at us one last time, searching for forgiveness, searching for a way out. I put my hand on Nana's shoulder. We didn't look away. We watched them being led out the side door. We watched the orange jumpsuits disappear into the shadows. For the first time in my life, the fear was gone. The obligation was gone. I looked down at Nana. She looked up at me and smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "Let's go home, Aaliyah," she said. I pushed her wheelchair down the center aisle. The crowd parted for us. We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright Atlanta sunshine. The air smelled of magnolias and exhaust fumes, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I didn't cry. There were no tears left to cry. There was just the road ahead, open and ours. The revenge was over. The healing had begun. 6 months ago, I walked into this house, and it smelled like death. Tonight, as I stand on the balcony overlooking the Great Hall, it smells like cinnamon cloves and fresh pine. It is Christmas Eve at the Thorne estate, and for the first time in as long as I can remember, the laughter echoing off the walls is real. There are no social climbers here tonight. There are no investors looking for a quick payout and no politicians looking for a photo opportunity. The room is filled with the people who actually matter. I see the nurses from my medical team who helped nurse Nana back to health. I see Mr. Stein raising a glass of cider near the tree. I see the neighbors who used to look at this house with suspicion, now walking through the front door with covered dishes and warm smiles. The transformation of the house is complete. We stripped away the marble statues my parents had bought to impress people they didn't like. We tore down the velvet ropes. We filled the space with warm wood, comfortable furniture, and art that actually means something to us. The house no longer feels like a museum or a mausoleum. It feels like a home. But the biggest change isn't in the living room. It is in the West Wing. I walked down the hallway that used to lead to my father's man cave and my mother's glam room. Those rooms are gone. In their place are glass doors etched with a simple logo: the Beatrice Thorne Community Health Center. I pushed the doors open and walked into the silent clinic. It was closed for the holiday, but the energy of the work we do here still hummed in the air. Where my father used to smoke cigars and plot his schemes, there is now a pediatric waiting room filled with toys. Where my mother used to hoard her designer clothes, there are now exam rooms providing free prenatal care to women in Buckhead who have been overlooked by the system. We opened the doors last month. The ribbon-cutting ceremony didn't make the front page of the society papers, and that was exactly how I wanted it. But the line of people waiting outside wrapped around the block. Nana B sat in the front row wearing a hat with a purple flower, cutting the ribbon with a pair of gold scissors. She told the crowd that this was the proudest day of her life. Not the day she bought the house, but the day she opened it to the world. I walked through the clinic, running my hand along the counters. This was my inheritance. Not the money, not the status, but the ability to serve. My parents had tried to steal a legacy of greed, but I had built a legacy of healing. I turned off the lights in the clinic and headed back to the main house. The party was winding down. Guests were putting on their coats, exchanging hugs and promises to meet up in the new year. I said my goodbyes thanking Marcus, who was now not just my head of security, but the director of operations for the clinic. He gave me a nod of respect that meant more to me than any applause. When the last guest had gone and the heavy oak doors were locked for the night, the house settled into a peaceful quiet. I went into the library, the room where I had found the will that saved us. A fire was crackling in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Nana Bia was sitting in her favorite armchair, a handmade quilt draped over her legs. She was holding a mug of hot cocoa, staring into the flames. She looked beautiful. Her hair was thick and silver, her skin was plump and hydrated, and her eyes were sharp and clear. The woman who had been lying in her own waste 6 months ago was gone, replaced by the matriarch she was always meant to be. I sat down on the rug at her feet, resting my head against her knee just like I used to do when I was a little girl. She ran her hand over my hair, her fingers warm and gentle. "It was a good party, Aaliyah," she said softly. "It was," I agreed, closing my eyes. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the pop and hiss of the firewood. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was the comfortable silence of two survivors who no longer needed words to understand each other. But then Nana spoke, her voice taking on a serious tone. "I got a letter today," she said. I stiffened slightly. "From who?" "From the prison," she said. "From Byron." I didn't open my eyes. I didn't want to break the spell of the evening. What did it say? "He says he is sorry," Nana said. "He says the food is terrible and the bed is hard. He says he misses the Christmas goose. He asked if I would put money on his commissary account." I let out a short, dry laugh. Of course he did. Even in prison he is still hustling. Nana sighed, a sound that held a lifetime of complicated love. "I didn't answer him," she said. "I burned the letter, just like you burned the past." She paused, and I felt her hand stop moving on my hair. "Aaliyah," she asked, "do you regret it?" I sat up and looked at her. The firelight illuminated her face, showing the lines of wisdom and the scars of betrayal. "Regret what, Nana?" "Sending them to prison, taking the house, all of it," she said. "They are your parents. People talk. They say you were ruthless. They say a daughter shouldn't do that to her own flesh and blood. Do you ever lie awake at night and wish you had just paid the money and let them go?" I looked into the fire, thinking about the question. I thought about the moment I saw Trey pinned to the floor. I thought about my mother's face when the handcuffs clicked. I thought about the silence of the house before the laughter returned. I took Nana's hand in mine. "I don't regret saving you," I said, my voice firm. "I don't regret saving this house, and I don't regret stopping them from hurting anyone else." I squeezed her hand. "But I do have one regret, Nana." She tilted her head, looking at me with curiosity. "What is it, child?" "I regret that I didn't come home sooner," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "I regret that I let my pride keep me in South Africa while you were suffering. I regret that I let them make me feel like I didn't belong here, so I stayed away. That is my only regret, that I left you alone with the wolves for so long." Nana smiled and leaned down to kiss my forehead. "You came when you were supposed to," she whispered. "You came when you were ready to fight. And you won." She sat back and looked around the room. "You know, people say family is blood," she mused. "They say blood is thicker than water." I looked at the portrait of my grandfather hanging above the mantel. "They are wrong," I said. Nana nodded. "They are wrong," she agreed. "Family isn't the blood that runs through your veins, Aaliyah. Family are the people who are willing to bleed for you. The people who stand by you when the money is gone. The people who clean you up when you are at your lowest. That is family." I stood up and kissed her cheek. "Merry Christmas, Nana." "Merry Christmas, Dr. Thorne," she replied with a wink. I walked to the window and looked out at the long driveway. It was empty. No police cars, no bank trucks, just the moonlight hitting the frost on the grass. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from my bank app. The monthly donation to the prison commissary had been processed, not for my parents, but for the inmate education fund. I wasn't sending my parents money for snacks. I was sending money to help people who actually wanted to change. I turned off the screen and looked at my reflection in the glass. I didn't see the scared girl who ran away 3 years ago. I saw a woman who had walked through the fire and came out carrying the water. My parents were in a cell of their own making. I was in a home of my own rebuilding. And as the clock struck midnight, signaling the start of a new day, I knew that the story of the thorns was no longer a tragedy. It was a victory. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to cut toxic people out of your life to save your own sanity, let me know in the comments below. If you believe that family is defined by love and not DNA, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you are the author of your own life. Do not let anyone else hold the pen. Until next time, stay strong and keep rising.